Hi everyone. Second video for this week, and it's an interesting week. In responding to some of your posts, I um, just wanted to share. I felt like it's rather a sort of drastic shift to go between Wilber and Casey in this way, and so there is a little bit of a sense of whiplash, or at least I have something like that. And I also, coming from a scientific background, um, which means that I um, don't regard science as sort of complete bullshit. I regard science with a certain respect, but I also don't want to limit myself to what we think are the findings of science. Science is the discoveries of science, the ideas of science are always provisional. They're always going to be potentially replaced by later ideas, and perhaps even radically new ideas. Nevertheless, with the evidence at our disposal now, what are the best views, the best theories that we have? And so I tend to regard that with at least some respect. And so there are elements of the Casey view that, I mean, to say that they fly in the face of mainstream science would be an understatement. And um, I don't really know what to make of that. And Lynn Sparrow Christie and others try to make a case for the scientific view being incorrect by citing other kinds of evidence that science may not have looked at. And that's always possible. That's always possible to happen, that science won't look at what really, really doesn't fit. And that's true, for example, with research on the paranormal, which is blatantly, I mean, the evidence for it when one looks closely at it is very strong, but scientists won't even look at it. Mainstream scientists won't even look at it. So there's that. So there is always this possibility that there's some idea outside of the paradigm that would really contradict it. And I'm not sure if we're in one of those domains, especially with talking about early man. I don't know. So I'm doing my best to stay open. Nevertheless, I beyond that sort of idea, which I sort of regard as a kind of an argument on the level of detail, it's like, what about the whole idea as a whole? And I think that we do owe a kind of debt of gratitude to Lynn Sparrow Christie, because she sort of distilled Casey down into a view that I feel is a lot more palatable, and is actually useful, and in sort of powerful ways. So that so regardless of the debate over the facts of ancient man and things like that, what about the whole sort of essence of the idea in general that's contained in Wilber and in Casey? And it seems to me that there are, in some ways, we've been asked by the discussion question to pit one against the other. I would like to suggest we do take it the other way around and look at it. In addition, how do they support one another, right? And in actual facts, I think that they do support one another quite significantly, especially when as in Lynn Sparrow's Christie's book, when we distill it down to this idea of evolutionary spirituality. And in my view, once you distill it down to that idea, that there's a kind of an evolutionary spirituality, there's the possibility of us getting on board with a larger process, and that's a part of why we're here, rather than just the individual journey. But there's a way in which we're all part of the universe becoming what it's becoming. then I feel like that actually is, the two views are right in line with one another. I don't see a huge contrast between the two views from that place. And then especially like even in terms of the goal, in Edgar Cayce, there's the talk of unity consciousness, and in Wilber, there's the non-dual consciousness, and these seems to me to be one could regard those as simply being one of the same goals. So in the essence of the idea, regardless of the details, I'm seeing rather a lot of similarity actually, and I think that might be more worthy of note than these sort of detailed differences that we're seeing, even though that's what the discussion board asked us to do. I wanted to mention in this video, just so the word evolution has only been used in the last couple hundred years, but there's a word that has had a much longer term use, or a concept that's had a much longer use, which is the very idea of progress. And in the West, the very idea of progress has been around at least since ancient Greece, and not so much in other cultures. But and I think that this is interesting. That we've had it for so long, at least in the West, and this sort of appears in various views. In ancient Greece, the myth of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans, and there's a play by an ancient Greek called Prometheus Bound that's based on this myth, and in there it's like this fire from the gods was what then enabled us to be creative, sort of aligned with Edgar Cayce, and to sort of participate in creation via our imaginations and ability to act. And so that there was right there the idea that we would create and progress, and that comes in even into Plato, although various different writers say different things about Plato. Some writers say that Plato has a cyclic view of development, and others say that no, he also referred to a progressive one. So that's not clear. But what is clear is when we get to St. Augustine. St. Augustine's in about the 4th century AD, so way back there really, and he had a well-developed model of progress from the sort of more nature-based animal towards an end, which he called the end. He called it the city of God. That the progress was towards this a kind of an ideal state, the city of God, where we would sort of be one with the divine will and divine consciousness, kind of thing. Saint Augustine is, is a very mainstream saint in the sense of being deeply included in Catholic theology, and so it's actually, strangely enough, interspersed with Christianity, at least in its more ancient forms, that there is this idea of progress, and that's coming from St. Augustine and others that followed him. So we're tapping into an idea, at least for the idea of human progress and development, that is quite ancient. Now, evolution is a different thing because that involves then the rest of creation. So these ideas of progress that are coming from ancient times really focus on the human development, individually and as a culture. But they don't include the whole of creation. The whole of creation was not really a part of that sort of not really a static phenomena, but not involved. Whereas the modern sort of scientific view of evolution, of course, is about the whole of creation evolving. And it's just a little bit of slight contrast. And that came in mostly with Darwin, but prior to that, perhaps with a few others. So now the idea of progress took on a greatly different view in sort of the 18th century, 19th century, with the advent of the scientific revolution, and it became about much more about the progress of knowledge in the domain of science and scientific progress. And I found it interesting to note that there are a number of writers who there's a lot of literature on the idea of progress as it has become expressed since the scientific revolution. And it was a very energetically held idea for some time, probably until I would say the midway through the last century, 20th century. And but a lot of writers are now pointing to the fact that there's a great disillusionment with this idea of progress, so that it's kind of fallen into disrepute. And in a way, there's a view that the sort of juice has gone out of it. The juice has gone out of our progress, because we see that it's double-edged. Progress, when it's associated with scientific progress, is seen to have negative consequences on the environment, with weaponry and all the kinds of things that can go wrong with this accumulation of knowledge that we have. So that there's a kind of an apathy almost in our current culture and society about progress, and almost like the sense that we might need to recover something from an earlier time, go back to something from an earlier time, that this isn't it hasn't been all it was cracked up to be. And I think that's an interesting view that I don't know what you guys think about it, but it's I think it is very prevalent in our current culture and society that progress has kind of lost its shine. And so this is of course it's in the context of this time that we are now studying the evolution of consciousness, and so but it's looking at things from a very different perspective. Perhaps from that perspective, this loss of the enthusiasm for the idea of progress is part of progress that was bound to happen, at least this aspect of progress. So I think, let's see, so what else did I want to say here? I mean, yeah, included in that idea of progress, especially in the recent idea of progress, is this idea that the new is better. And this is going to become relevant, but it's already relevant to us, actually. That so there's a part of progress, like even within art and science, that it's like the new theory, the new school of art is progressive from the last one. That it's progressing towards something, and that is not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true. So perhaps there are different perspectives that would help us in sort of absorbing these ideas. But progress in art and science is, at least today, seen as not necessarily positive. So I think I've said most of what I would like to say. I just want to encourage you all to not treat these ideas in a kind of, this is going to happen all the way through the course, right? So not treat these ideas in a totally as totally intellectual things. It's, the view of Edgar Cayce is not coming from an intellectual place at all. Wilber's is, but our evaluation. If we evaluate these two things from an intellectual perspective, then Wilber's way is really always going to win. So in comparing the two, so it's like we have to what is the consciousness? What is the mode of knowing that the Cayce view comes from? Or what is the mode of knowing that the Wilber view comes from? Can we actually access those modes of knowing a little ourselves? and thereby looking into our own experience, our own consciousness, sort of see where we connect with both of these ways, and so try and sort of switch the dial, switch the mode of consciousness by which we actually even evaluate these various different things, and not do it on the intellectual plane. Because here's the thing, and you may agree with me or not, that's fine, but on the intellectual plane, on the rational plane, on the plane of direct, what you might call scientific-like evidence, you can't really compare the two. I feel like it's a mistake to actually go to that kind of evidence to try and support Casey, because I think it's just coming from an entirely different place. It's a different frequency, and so we have to take that into account, that shift in frequency. In other words, there's the kind of truth that's on this plane that we're in, this physical plane, and the rational really sort of responds to the physical. It's like really a part of it, that kind of truth. But the idea of truth is so much bigger than that. And so we're going to have to not limit ourselves to that kind of truth in order to extract all of the benefit, all of the potential of the material we're going to encounter in this course. So we're going to have to try and shift our minds and not just be purely intellectual. So I do encourage you to go into your own experience. You've all got consciousness. You've all experienced your own evolution. You're all a part of a greater whole that in some way in consciousness you have access to, and you all have your own access to higher levels to some degree. And so it's like, okay, so what's your experience been, and how does that line up with the kinds of content that we're reading? So that's all I've got to say for now. And I just want also to say, I'll say it in the text when I send this, but I'm actually going to be traveling to England for leaving on Monday for a week, and I'll still be in touch and connect, because England has internet too. But it's possible that I'll be a little less responsive than I've been this week. But I'm only gone for a week. But I'm going to try and carve out a couple of hours a day, an hour or two a day, to in London. I'll be in London to tune into you guys, and you're going to be submitting papers on Sunday, and I have a 10-hour flight, so I have some time to give you feedback on the papers too. All right. Hope you have a good rest of the week. Okay.